Road Forward, a podcast for trucking industry leaders. Brought to you by TruckSpy, the all-in-one fleet management platform built to empower your drivers to be productive, compliant, and safe. My name is Alex. Today, we're sitting down with Ronak and Shivam from Ansell Services, where they make it easy to recruit and retain your drivers. In this episode, we're going to discuss driver shortage and why the answer maybe is a little bit more nuanced. We compare over the road to last mile and the challenges and advantages to both. We also discuss the job market and how employees and companies can make better decisions with data. Let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about is a driver shortage, okay? Because I'm seeing different videos online. I'm seeing different people online. They're saying, oh, there's no driver shortage, especially because the rate is like for freight. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to lane rate data or anything like that, or just volumes in general, right? Obviously, it's one of those things that it always fluctuates, and the rates oftentimes reflect those fluctuations. However, a big argument that I'm seeing people say is there is no driver shortage is because the rates are so like cheap. However, to my understanding, we've met and talked before, is that you guys, because your company specifically deals with onboarding and drivers and applicants and stuff like that, you have the expertise, the knowledge, like firsthand on whether or not there actually is a driver shortage. So whoever is better equipped to answer that question, is there actually a driver shortage?
So I can take that real quick. Short and sweet answer is yes. Certain parts of the country has shortage. We're seeing a lot of people move away from the trade, meaning like driving a truck and going into different fields. So short and simple answer, in my view, it is. We're seeing a lot of pockets, right, of city and state. Every city and every state is different, but a lot of pockets inside. If you look at the data, there is a shortage. We're seeing a lot of baby boomers moving away and retiring, which is causing youngsters not to go into this trade because they see, oh well, on the road this doesn't seem like a good life. I can do other things, right? Like invest and make that money. So, short and sweet answer, I would say there is a shortage in pockets. And Shivam, if you want to chime in.
Yeah, and just to add to that, right? So, we keep getting asked this question. And what I tell people is you cannot really paint the whole market with the same brush. Every micro market is so distinctly different. Like we recruit in Atlanta, we recruit in Savannah, Georgia. Both those places are a couple hours away, and the markets cannot be more different. And that's what we've seen. We've seen pockets where we find drivers in the dozens, who are really desperate for a job. And then we see places like, say, Utah or, a lot of different pockets where nobody seems to want a new job. Everyone seems to have everything sorted. To couple with that, with the general driver shortage, we're seeing a plummet in terms of retention of drivers. People just don't stick to the same job. I think the last couple of years spoiled people with sign-on bonuses. They realized that they could jump ship and make a couple percentages more. And that trend does not seem to have come down. We're still seeing super high turnover. And that's, I think, where a lot of the problem stems from with people not having enough drivers. It's because, they're just running through a lot of these drivers a lot faster.
Okay, and so you said markets like in Atlanta and Savannah, right? So that's cities, what are they, 3 hours apart roughly? And so you're saying those two markets are wildly different, and they're in the same state, similar geography, weather's decent basically all year round. And so even those two different markets, it's wildly different results on what companies get for applicants.
Absolutely. Similar, like Dallas and Houston. Just today we were talking to someone who's based out of Dallas. We're based out of Houston. Completely different. Like they're two different, parts of the country.
So what is the like? Why is there that difference? Is it like the bigger the city gets, the harder it is to find drivers generally, because maybe a bigger city attracts like higher tech jobs and stuff like that, and inevitably like less truckers? Like what is the difference between different markets that you've noticed? Maybe some of the key top markets that you guys are in.
So honestly, it's just been tough. It's been tough to put our finger at the exact problem. For example, Chicago is a massive city. Extremely tough to find drivers there. At the same time, Houston's a large city as well, a lot easier here. So My hunch, and it's all a hunch, is that it's demand and supply. Number one, number two, it's just the demographics of those cities. For obvious reasons, San Francisco just sees a lot more high income people residing in that city, and so it's a lot difficult finding low income, blue collared workers. And at the same time, Houston might just have a lot more of them. But it's been difficult for me to kind of put the finger on the problem. But what about you, Ronak?
So one thing, and like Shimon was saying, it's all a hunch, right? Right now we're just throwing darts and hoping that we hit the bullseye, right, in the dark. So my hunch is two things, right? It's twofold. So I've seen a lot of cities, right? I'll give you an example: Kansas City, Missouri, and Lenexa, Kansas, right? In that area, I've seen a lot of trucking jobs, right? Like big trucking companies that are there, and it's hard to find and compete. So like most of our clientele is within FedEx and Amazon. So FedEx contractors are looking for the same from the same pool as everybody else is. So who is able to streamline it and get to that pool faster is the ones who get the drivers. So it's very hard to understand and figure out, okay, what city and what's going on, because we have to look at the microcosm of what the job market looks like in that particular city, and who are you competing against. So, um, like Sean was saying, supply and demand, and just looking at every city differently and how to figure out what strategies to use.
So a good question would be like, how does a driver find out like what market he's in? Is he in a difficult market? Is he in a like an easy market? Like where would a driver go to figure this information out? Because knowing this information would then help him determine whether he can ask for higher pay, an onboarding bonus, a 90-day bonus, right? So depending on what market you're in. So where would a driver find like this information?
That's a great question, Alex. So I'll tell you this, right? So all the job boards, and if they are on Indeed or Facebook jobs and stuff, there's stats out there that show that, hey, this is how many jobs are available versus how many applicants. So we all the time what we're doing is educating our clients and saying, hey, this is the job market you're in specific, and this is what your pay should be. So we're educating them, but having that knowledge for a trucker or for employee in general is great to have. So you should have that in your toolbox. I'll be more than happy to talk to people and talk them through how to get to that. But like I said, so Indeed will tell you, okay, you're posting and there's 90,000 jobs out there versus only 15,000 applicants. So like, wow, okay, 1:4. Wow, okay, this is how you understand and figure out that you're in a tight job market, which will help you negotiate better, pay, better benefits. A lot of the times I've seen is it's all about benefits more than the pay. Your pay is important, but also like having that benefit. So we educate our clients. We were just able to educate one of our clients who was in Kentucky and told them, hey, this is the job market you're in. This is what the pay scale should be. This person did not have any health benefits, right? Like health insurance and so on and so forth. He just started adding that. So knowing what market you're in will help you also from client perspective. We're able to do that, and from trucker's perspective as well as an employee.
Right. So if you're a driver, you want to know like your location, your market, because maybe you're working for company A and they're 10-mile commute for you, and you'd really want to work for company B that's a 1-mile commute, right? Like that's important. Fuel is expensive. So you're trying to, but when you go apply for company B, they're maybe not paying you or they don't have the same benefits package. And so knowing what your what your job market is for your local area can help you get that job that's better for you because you live closer or something like that. And then from there, you will get paid the same with similar benefits. And so if you are a driver, make sure you're paying attention to this. Like, hey, learn your local job market dynamics so then you can use that information to your advantage. And as a company, like learn your local job dynamics too. Make sure you're not underpaying, because then you're going to be scratching your head. Why am I paying? Like, why is my turnover so high when you're 10% under what the job market in your area is you normally pays? So really that's valuable.
Yeah, and like you said, it's very important to know from employers as well as employee, but employers find that out too late, and it's very important to know ahead of time, because when they find out, it's already too late, and they're engaging us saying, "Hey, I have to reject all these loads because I can't take them. I don't have employees," right? So it's important to educate yourself and keep educating and understanding what the markets keeps on changing, right? Every 6 months, it's like, oh, something new has happened, and this is what the market is. So understanding as an employer is very important.
Right. People are moving across state lines all the time. You don't know, 6 months there might have been a shortage of these types of demographics, and now there's not. So it's like, yeah, you definitely, as an employee and as a company owner, you want to make sure you're paying attention to your local information, so that then you can both get good retention and get good customers, provide that service that that customers want of you, but also as an employee you can get the best benefits possible.
Exactly. And a lot of times, like, these jobs are mobile when you think about it. We have a client in Kansas City couldn't find team drivers, right? So what we had to do is get creative and get people from Florida, Jacksonville, Florida, Orlando, Florida. We had a couple of teams there ready to go. They flew them out to Kansas City. Once they get the truck and trailer, they can run wild, right? They're just running wild for 2-3 weeks, and then they'll make sure they end them up in their home city and home state. So it's very important to know those nuances and figure out, okay, if my market's very tight, what can I do to make this better? How do I fill my roles by getting creative? What are some of the things that you have to think about outside of the box as an employer to get an employee?
Right. Okay. And this is where you guys specialize, right? It's you guys help companies like get drivers in the door quicker, correct? And do you want to just briefly go over what does Ansel Services do?
Sure. So Ansel Services basically works with last mile and mid mile, so that's long haul truckers and last mile delivery companies, helping them recruit and then retain talent. So our main focus is obviously in recruiting. So once we work with a company, like Ronak said, every micro market is different. We customize advertising strategies based on their requirements, their cities. Sometimes posting a free job on Indeed does the trick. Sometimes it's a couple $1,000s on social media that does the trick. We try to meet the candidates where they spend most amount of time. That could be Snapchat, that could be Instagram, that could be Facebook jobs. And once people apply, it's kind of just running them through the system. Every company has different requirements. Background checks, drug tests, employment verifications, endorsements. So we kind of try to take care of all of that. And at the end of the day, present a driver who's completely ready to go, who's just needs to get badged and get started.
Okay, so you take just a guy maybe that's never heard of this company, that's your customer, your client. You take that person and get them prepped, completely ready to go for a badge to walk in the door and ready to work. Okay, and I could see how for a company that's struggling to hire drivers, right, in their local marketplace, they're struggling to find, like, that would be exceptionally important, because it's like without drivers, those trucks are not moving, they're just costing you money, so it's like that's ridiculous. To kind of go back, and so you said there's a twofold problem, right? Number one is, yes, there's definitely a driver shortage, but number two is there's a retention problem as well, right? Whether individuals are job hopping, which, it doesn't help when studies come out and say, like, if you switch your job every 2 years, you'll make more money. It's like, that probably doesn't help. So what do you see in the retention? What do you see that companies do well? Like, what are those things that a company could do to increase their retention?
So, I've been in line haul for more than 10 years, right? So what I've seen, and when I was managing a fleet of 96 trucks and over 150 drivers, right? 120 of them were CDL endorsed, and 30 of them were bulk truck drivers. But anyway, so what we saw was we had to create a culture where it was we were appreciative of all the things they were doing. So we would have cookouts, we would give them a free hat, things that are small but go a long way. Just every Wednesday we would just have conference area where we're sitting outside and just talking to the drivers and engaging them, making sure that they understand everything, right, from taking from benefits all the way to what they're expected to do. So having those conversations, engaging them, because what we've seen and what I feel like this is a more of a managing the people, right? When you're looking for employees and how you manage it, if you manage your people well, you're going to retain them longer. Just having that understanding and them having access to you. So a lot of my drivers had, all my cell phone number, my personal details. If they wanted to reach out to me, I was a P&D contractor for over 2.5 years, and my retention was a lot higher because they had access to me, right? I would talk to them, I would go and meet them. If it was a hot day, I would just give them a water bottle. Like cold water bottle and a cold Gatorade goes a long way. So doing those small things helps you retain drivers. Obviously, what we have seen with other customers in the line haul space is they're giving healthcare benefits not only to the employees but also to their family members, making sure they're treating them nicely and fairly, right? So we've seen a lot of things they are doing to help retain. I always have this motto: retention is the best kind of recruiting. If you retain your drivers, you're not going to need recruiting per se. There's always times that people turn over because they have life events that happen, but making sure that you are retaining your drivers is the best kind of recruiting in my view.
Just to add a little bit more to that, basically, I think we've hired a lot of drivers who've kind of just shifted laterally. They've moved for similar pay, similar work, and we ask them. We're like, hey, you were getting paid the same amount of money. Why do you want to move? And the big kind of headline that came out of that survey that we did on more than 100 people is they're like, you know what, my contractor cheated me, or my boss shorted me on my pay. And I know a lot of the people they work for. I don't think that the employer did that, but it's just some sort of a deduction, some sort of some details which the employee did not care to understand. And because he didn't have an open line of communication, that kind of bred misunderstanding. Unfortunately, what we've seen increase exponentially over the last couple of years is sort of a distrust between employees and employers. And it goes both ways. But given that your candidate, your employee is on the road, maybe for a couple of weeks at a time, you don't get to see him apart from just onboarding him, keeping that communication open, making him feel like he's a valued member of your team, which it is. I haven't met a single contractor who does not respect his drivers. Like you said, they need the drivers to run their business, but it's just getting that point across that seems to be missing. And it's a problem with scale. If you have 5 drivers, it's easy to do. Once you start having like a couple dozen, I understand it's difficult. It sort of becomes like a full-time job. But find ways. Just randomly reach out to a driver, check in on how he's doing. The other thing is, make sure when you onboard someone, you document everything. There are too many people I've seen in the industry that don't give proper documentation. And it's, it works fine, but that's kind of what breeds to a lot of misunderstandings very often. Otherwise, it's very easy to kind of diffuse any situation by saying, hey, go read that paper. You've got it wrong. Just read it again. You'll understand.
Right. And so it's like, first of all, crystal clear outlined expectations, right? It's like, here you go. Like, this is what we want you to do. Here's how everything works. Here's how all your deductions work. Here's here's what an average settlement would look like. And here's what each of these deductions would look like, right? So you know what you're getting deducted. And then from there, have that open line of like, hey, if you ever have any issues, feel free to shoot me a call directly. Or maybe there's some kind of internal software for communication. It's like, feel free to reach out on the internal software, communicate with us. But like you said, it's challenging, like, because I had a company with 27 trucks and it was like, oh my goodness, what do I do? It was just all the time, constantly, bombarded with messages and inquiries and certainly that can be resolved with good expectations and onboarding, like training in the beginning, and then that'll reduce that amount. But certainly having that open line of communication is like massively beneficial and necessary, at this point. And so you're seeing the companies that do well with retention, they can really put those two things in force really well, correct?
Absolutely. I've seen, like you said, that sample payout letter that, hey, this is like a sample, 1 week's paycheck, and these are the deductions. Keep it simple. A lot of people try to overly engineer the pay. That I'll give you this, and then this is your safety bonus, and this is that, which is great. I understand you're trying to align people to your, goals, but it's just, A, it's a headache to compute every week. B, you're just creating avenues for misunderstandings. So,
right, yeah, simplicity for sure, yeah. And I think that's certainly. I wouldn't be surprised if the roots of that are maybe in like the mega carriers, right? Because mega carriers certainly have that overcomplicated settlements, right? It's like they just tons and dozens of lines, and you're like, what do all of these means? And each line has a minus to it, right? None of them have a plus, it's like, and so you're getting frustrated, and like, because a lot of CDL holders, they went through the mega carriers, right? You got your CDL with the mega carrier more than likely. So a lot of these drivers are maybe now burned from the mega carriers that they maybe potentially got a CDL with, right? And so like that makes perfect sense for sure. Like, just keep your settlement straightforward, especially if you're a smaller company. That can help with your retention. So that's interesting. But to go back, you mentioned you do a little bit of mid-range, like long haul, regional stuff like that, and also last mile or final mile. Talk to me some of the differences between final mile. First of all, a definition, like what is considered final mile? Is it like actually 1 mile, like last mile, or is it something that brings it to the...
So it's to your door. It's something that comes to the end customer.
Okay, so that's a package that actually, it doesn't go to the terminal. It actually goes, that's the person that delivers it to your door, right? That is last mile or final mile.
Yeah, he typically picks it up from the terminal and gets it to your door.
Okay, and so any key takeaways or differences between long haul and final mile?
Completely different beasts in a way. So the candidate pool available in long haul is a lot larger, right? So the requirements are a lot slimmer. All they need is a DOT physical. They might need, typically people look for 6 to 12 months of commercial driving experience, which includes Uber Eats or DoorDash. So the availability of talent is a lot more. The quality of talent continues to be an issue. On the other hand, if you know someone has a CDL license, that it's his career. He's looking at this as a career. He's going to make sure his safety is in line. He's going to make sure he follows the rules. You don't get that same assurance in the last mile delivery space, and thus we see a lot of safety incidences. We see a lot of contractors get into a lot of trouble with safety. You see insane amount of attrition. So Amazon delivery drivers turn over on average 2% a week. And 2% a week is the average. I've seen plenty of people do worse. And obviously I've seen a couple that do better. 2% a week means you're replacing more than your whole team every year. The average last mile delivery company has about 30, 35 drivers. So like when you're talking about basically 8% attrition, it's a fairly challenging situation in that space. Equally different from CDL, but equally challenging from a recruiting perspective.
Right. It's almost like your entire business isn't actually delivering packages on time. It's just hiring drivers. Like, that's your entire business of getting drivers in the door.
It's funny you said that. So we were, like Ronak mentioned, we were contractors running, at the time, almost 50 plus drivers in the last mile space. And we were looking to expand that. And then, when we took a harder look at the problem, we're like, this isn't a logistics problem. This seems to be a recruiting issue. And let's solve that first. And doing that is kind of how, Ansel Services came about. And now we work with like 200 businesses. We process thousands of candidates every day. For our clients.
And what markets are you guys based in?
All over the U.S. We're in 35 states. We're physically based in Houston, A lot of our teams are distributed.
Okay, so you guys work with customers all over the U.S. That's pretty great, and this is why it's really interesting. Like you have that insight, like to see all the differences, and so that's crazy, man. Like, oh my goodness. But the advantage of probably though, and see, and this is where the question though becomes, right. It's like the advantage of last mile would be that you get to see your drivers every day. And so you would maybe think that because you get to see your drivers every day, because you get to see those vehicles, they're not broken, they're not, you can take better maintenance of them. Like you would think that would help with the retention. You would think that would help with the turnover, but it doesn't. I mean, like, why is that? So what is the issues then with last mile? Like why are people not wanting to do it? Is it like I recently saw like some trucks for some local delivery trucks in Arizona don't even have air conditioning in them. Like, is it just would that be part of the issue? Like, if it's 110 degrees outside and your truck doesn't have air conditioning, like, I wouldn't want to work in that. You know what I mean? So, like, what are the issues that, like, why is the turnover so high in last mile when everything is setting up for it to be not high?
So I'll tell you from our experience, right? Every terminal, so there in FedEx contracting perspective, right? There's over 600 and some terminals all over US, right? So every terminal has more than 10 to 12 on average contractors. Our terminal where I was based out of in Austell, Georgia, there was over 25 contractors in that same terminal. So every contractor runs their business differently, right? So some contractors will see, like Sherwin was saying, 2 to 5% a week turnover, right? Versus when I first started, I was having that because we had to change the whole culture and the mindset of drivers, right? So understanding like there's no blanket answer, hey, this is why it is, right? Every contractor runs their business completely differently. So some contractors don't even have a handbook, right? As simple as how Shivam was saying, just having a guideline. Hey, these are your expectations. You get paid every Friday. This is my way of paying. You will get direct deposit, whatever the case may be. Not some people don't give their phone numbers, right? To as an owner, they're like, oh, I'm above this. I'm not going to give phone number to my employees. My first day, I came in. Hey, here's my phone number. This is like you can call me anytime up to this point. If there's an emergency after this point, just give me a text and I'll take a look at it, right? So having that same thing, right, is you cannot pinpoint one thing that works for a contractor whereas another doesn't work. So it's knowing your employees and understanding one at a time to figure out. So I give this example, and I'm going on a different tangent, but I'll give you an example. I used to volunteer at a daycare, right? So the daycare had anywhere from a 2-year-old all the way to a 13-year-old. So I did not talk to a 2-year-old the same way I would talk to a 13-year-old. So it's knowing how to talk to your employees and what are their buttons and how you can manage that, right? So that helps reducing your turnover. Some people are not good at it. Some people need lessons on how to do that. That will help their retention. Another thing I suggest on retention side, what happens is when we're onboarding someone, right? There's like 10 steps to get them through the system for FedEx. That's minimum, right? Even in last mile. So all in all, there's about 50 things employee goes through when they're getting hired for a company. That's just average of things they have to do to get hired. Out of 50, if they remember 5 of those things, that's good, right? 10% retention is what they'll remember when they're onboarding. So it's very important to have that line of communication. Yeah, giving a handbook is great, but talking through each point, and you don't have to do it all in one day. You could do it over a couple of weeks or 3 weeks. So that first 30 to 60 days are very important when it comes to, onboarding them and making sure you have that 30-day talk, 60-day talk, 90-day talk to help on the retention side. So there is no one single answer, say, hey, I'm better than this person is, or, I'm the best at it. You always have to learn and understand how to talk to your employees, what are their buttons, and then on the onboarding side, making sure you're holding their hands longer to help with the retention.
don't get me wrong, I totally understand the like customize your approach to each driver. Totally get it, right? Different people operate in different ways, so you want to learn the person and then customize your approach to the individual person. Totally get that, but it still doesn't answer why is it that on last mile, why are why are they struggling? Why is their like turnover so high compared to like when they have all of the things? I thought for sure last mile would be good. Like, is the pay just not enough? Is like doing $15 an hour? I don't know what the pay is, but like for assuming it's $15 an hour, would that be just not enough for jumping in and out of your truck and doing 100 deliveries a day? Like, what are the issues?
So last mile delivery, contrary to popular belief, it pays decently. I wouldn't say it pays amazing, but for someone who may not have an education, who may not have any certifications or something like that, last mile is good, solid income. It's consistent. There's always a demand. All those things. It's not like an Uber Eats, which is based on surge and all of that stuff. So it does pay well, and that's why it attracts a lot of applicants. But I'll tell you another thing. I've delivered packages. I've tried that out for a couple of days. It's a tough job. You mentioned air conditioning. These guys are lugging mattresses, sofas, 3 floors up an apartment without an elevator. They're doing 150 stops. They're driving to rural locations which don't have proper roads. They're dealing with they're dealing with dogs. They're dealing with the weather. They're dealing with the elements basically. And all of this, and they're getting pressured to make certain deliveries because the contractors getting pressured to maintain certain efficiency standards. So it's tough on the body. There's no two ways about it. It's a tough job. The second thing is it's the demographic and the candidate pool. Because it's so easy to get in, not enough people think of it as a career. And again, I think this is also a little bit of the last 2 years where we've had this, completely lopsided labor market where everyone just has so many opportunities the average age of a last mile delivery driver is basically between 25 and 35. At that age, a lot of people are just maybe not that serious. And thus they're bouncing around, trying different things because the options are available. They can walk down the street and get a job that pays similar amounts of money, when they get tired of this. So it's definitely a difficult job, and that does play to attrition. I also think it's the demographics, just because they're younger, not that career oriented at that age.
Right. When you're in your 40s, you're a little bit more serious about what do you want to do the next 5-7 years, because at the end of the day, you like at 40, you're probably then thinking about like, well, I'm going to retire in 15-20 years. It's like I probably should start saving up rather quickly because it's like then I'm not going to have much to live off of when I'm retired. So, and at 25, 27, you're like, dude, I got my whole life ahead of me. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, and it's like look at me, it's like I went from trucking to being a podcast, editor, and it's like I learned while editing, while not while I was driving, but I learned it while I was parked and whatnot, and just because I was bored. And it's like, it's amazing that, yeah, you could make similar, if not more money doing something from home, like digitally, instead of having to drive day in and day out and deliver packages. So it makes sense that people are constantly searching, but that just makes it challenging for the companies when at the end of the day, it's like I order on Amazon. I want my packages in a day or two, so it's like the demand is ever increasing. And so it's like, it's going to be a tough balance, which, kind of leads me like, where do you guys see with, automation or self-driving trucks? Like, do you guys have any insight into that? And like, how does will your business model take that into account, too, as well? Like, what happens if in the next 5 to 7 years they start putting those on the road? Like, what do you do there?
So we had a lot of conversations around that. And that is something that we're aware of. So again, 2 different segments. In terms of last mile delivery, I'm not that worried. I feel the depth of the market and what's opening up in terms of last mile. So, when we think of last mile, we think of, packages. We think of Amazon, FedEx, and UPS, which is there, but they're probably less than 20% of the market. You look at food delivery, grocery delivery, cannabis deliveries become massive these days. Basically, everything is getting delivered to you by either a W-2 worker or a 1099 flex worker. Best Buy, Walmart, they're all now using their own delivery fleet in a way. You order on the Apple website, you pay $9, you'll get your iPhone today. And that's not being delivered by FedEx. That's someone driving their own car, going to the Apple store and picking things up and delivering to you. So, that's a segment where maybe we're not too worried for the next 5 to 10 years. And the depth of the market is insane. In long haul trucking, I do feel that there will be some disruption. I don't know if it will replace the driver. It might increase their efficiency. Maybe the hours of service will get elongated or something of that sort because, self-driving would make them just more efficient. They'd be less tired. That would be a welcome change. It would help make this whole process more efficient. It'll make quality of life better for a driver. It'll make quality of life better for the owner. But yes, I do think we're, still some time away. It's just not the technology of self-driving, it's the charging infrastructure and a whole lot of other things that I guess need to build up. And, we'd maybe, and we'd obviously have to innovate and evolve with the changing dynamics. But yeah, that's definitely something that we talk about.
We're going to bring back full service fuel stops, where they actually pump your fuel for you. Right. And that sounds about right. It's like, the first thing it'll do is more than likely make it more efficient, which is, it's like, and that's a good example of like, hey, maybe instead of 11 hours, you can now do 13 because 2 of those hours, you're really not doing much, during the day because the truck is almost driving itself. So, that's interesting. So it's going to be really like you want to pay attention to it because you don't know exactly how the market, like how the industry will change, right? How the trucking industry will welcome that feature in, whether it's through, new law, like adjustments in the laws, whether it's like the co-pilot program where like one truck follows, like an actual driver drives the front truck, but the other truck, the guy is sleeping and it's just following the truck in front. So I think it's a co-pilot program. So, depending on how the industry adapts to that, it's going to be really interesting. But, man, that's, it's always really interesting having, like you guys, guests on the podcast, like you guys, that really have, like wide, like knowledge base across the whole industry, both because you guys had your own companies and you were like you guys drove, P&D and trucks, right? So you guys have your CDLs or no?
No, I don't have a CDL, but I have driven on a yard, right? So I had a team of yard hustlers, spotters, right? Just spotting. So I had to do all that. So, anyways, I have done it, not on the road though. But P&D, I own 35 trucks, and like Shivam said, we had at a time in peak we had over 50 drivers on the road at a time. So. And that also is tough, right? Having that 35, I'll give you that example, and I'll try to like go in full circle when it comes to retention. Is when you have 35 trucks and over 40, 50 employees, it's hard to slow it down. When people come in initially, you got to try to slow it down for everybody. So you're not sending them out with half, like not having enough. Training when it comes down to it. So trying to slow it down will help as well, which you can't do that in P&D, which is last mile, right? So you can't do that. Unfortunately, when I first started, didn't think it was going to be so fast paced, but it's very fast paced. And it's always evolving. People, are adding more stops, taking more stops off. You have to learn the scanner, so on and so forth. So there's a lot to take in. Drivers and contractors and all of them feel like you're drinking from the fire hose, and it's very tough to come down.
Right. I totally agree. It's like when I first started onboarding drivers, it was like it took forever. It's like we're doing a manual email process. It takes a month and you're like going back and forth all the time. And then you're like, man, I could fix this with some technology. And so then you fix that and then onboarding goes down to a week, right? And you're like, oh, this is great. And then you fix it some more and you put people in place to double check everything. And then onboarding goes on to a day. And you're like, wait, I can onboard a guy in a day. And sure enough, like I started to grow really quickly. But then I realized my quality was terrible, right? It was just terrible. Like guys didn't even know, like, hey Alex, why did I get this deduction? Like I had all these struggles. Like how do you guys handle this situation? What am I supposed to do here? I don't know how to secure this. I don't know where I'm supposed to go next. I'm not getting into communication, and I'm waking up to the 4 or 5 a.m. call because I'm maybe on the West Coast and the guy is 8 a.m. on the East Coast, and so he did like and like yeah, it's one of those things. So you guys are doing. You guys are doing really good work, so that's fantastic. So if you're watching this podcast and you're enjoying the show, absolutely leave us a review. We appreciate those a lot. But where can people find your company to discuss you? Like, what's the best way to reach out to you?
You could go on our website, www.ancile.services, and that's maybe the best way to start.
Okay, cool. So I will make sure to leave your information in the description below. Guys, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. And we'll talk, we'll talk again soon, and we'll just, see where the trucking industry goes from here.